months, but I've been talking her into it. Just got back from Europe yesterday. I was at high school graduation. So somewhere north of Frankfurt. So it wasn't too far from down here.
There we go.
Madam Mayor, counting down. 10, 9, 8.
Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of July 18th, 2024. I'm calling this meeting to order at 7:33 p.m. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And roll call, please.
Madam Mayor, we have no request under roll call item A, so I'll do the roll call now. Councilmember Cunningham?
Here.
Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Lenz?
Here.
And Councilmember Mackin?
Here.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Here. Thank you. Can we get a report out from closed session, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The council met in closed session to discuss a pending litigation matter involving CEQA and provide direction to council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Please note that we also removed one item from the closed session agenda for the evening because of lack of information. Do they need to respond to that? No.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking Ingrid. No, because you removed it. You were right. I should have said it, but because you removed it, no, there's nothing more that has to be done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I would like to make a couple of changes to the agenda. One is to close in memory of Bob Wilson and Joy Mejias. And the other is to move old business item Q in front of item I. Does staff have a problem with doing that change? Okay. And with that, can I get a first and a second to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved. Oh, Karen.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Davis,
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Lentz,
Aye.
and Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. We are going to move on to awards and presentations. And tonight we have designating July as Park and Recreation Month. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities through this country, including the city of Brisbane. And whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being, and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Park and Recreation programming and education activities, such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education, are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Park and Recreation is essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. Whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Brisbane recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council, the Brisbane City Council, that July is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Brisbane. Do we have anyone who is going to be accepting this on the behalf of?
We'd like to invite the representatives from the Parks and Recreation Commission to receive the proclamation.
Ms. Sims, thank you. Wait, she's gonna grab a photo, so.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Do we all want to be in this?
Yeah, we should.
We can all be in this.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. And would you like to say a few words? Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
If I may,
Frank?
Madam Mayor and Honorable Council, we accept this with such joy, and thank you very much for your support of Parks and Recreation in Brisbane. It is a true honor to be here and to work alongside such amazing Parks and Rec staff. So I just want to give a shout out to Noreen and Nicole and the entire team who make it all happen. And it seems like we have a very packed agenda, so I won't be too long. But the other thing I just want to say is we are dedicated as a Parks and Rec Commission to making the parks and the childcare and everything that gets wrapped into Parks and Rec the best it can be. And I think we've made a lot of strides with your support. And we are just going to continue to move along that path and make the Parks and Recreation opportunities in this community as strong as they can be. So thank you so much for this. It means a lot.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to presenting Brisbane Marina Harbormaster Rehberg and Public Works Maintenance Worker Redfield with Lifesaving Commendation Award. On July 5th, the Harbormaster, Andrew Rehberg, heard from a member of the yacht club that 2 people were in the water outside the North Seawall. Harbormaster Andrew and maintenance worker Chris Redfield rushed out of the office and took the Marina's boat to their location, where they found one of the victims slipping under the water. Chris and Andrew both grabbed the victim and were able to pull him under the boat. Fortunately, the other victim was already out of the water. He was taken to the hospital where he was later released. Andrew and Chris, your actions on July 5th embody the best of what the city of Brisbane does on a daily basis, which is to serve the public as best we can. On behalf of the entire city council and the Brisbane team, we thank you and commend you both for your quick thinking and remarkable rescue. We'd like to present both of you with a life-saving award from the city of Brisbane. If you'd like to come up. So on the behalf of City of Brisbane, we thank you both and commend your great service to the public. And this one's for you. And that's for you. Thank you so much.
Turn around, you gotta get a photo op.
Yes, we're going to get a photo op again.
Okay, 1, 2, Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and if you'd like to say a couple words, you're certainly welcome to.
While I'm not much of a speaker, I do want to say thank you to the City Council and the City of Brisbane for the accommodation. I believe this was a culmination of great teamwork of everybody involved that day, having the right equipment on hand, very fortuitous timing to create this very fortunate event. So thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to oral communications number 1. Are there any members of the public wishing to make public comment on an item not on the agenda? I do have a few slips, and the first one is from Nancy Bui.
Good evening.
You can pull it down.
Sorry. So good evening, Madam Mayor and Honorable Council. I am the new superintendent of Brisbane, and I just wanted to come and say hello. I wrote a smiley face on the card. I don't know if you saw that. But just wanted to extend our gratitude and our appreciation for the partnership. I've had wonderful exchanges with Councilmember Davis, had a lovely meeting with Jeremy Dennis, and I learned about Day in the Park from Michelle Salmon when I walked in. Ingrid told me that her children attended our schools, so I feel very welcomed. I feel very honored to be in such a welcoming, close-knit community. I'm looking forward to more partnership, and thank you so much for embracing our students. I know that there's an annual event that the City Council hosts, and it's been a really big joy to be part of, so thank you so much. We look forward to working with Parks and Rec, City Council, and every single person here to make Brisbane the best school district in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. The next slip I have is from Ron Colonna, and I think this is an oral communications item.
Good evening. So I was conferring with the planning, not commission, but the staff. And so one of the things I had a lot of things. It turns out that a lot of what I have to say has not anything to do with your overlay project, but I got a lot of other things that refer to in the properties up where I'm at in Paul Avenue, Brisbane. I think I mentioned the last time about the lawyer Hal Tobel jumping up and asking the council to legislate that any building on Margaret and Paul had to comply with all of Margaret and all of Paul being brought up to whatever the current standard is of 20 feet and all this other stuff. That's essentially putting a freeze on anything happening there. It's not doable, and there's not going to be any improvement in any way. So my thoughts were along, there's the planner and I don't remember the titles now, but the idea was that there are hillside communities like in Orinda, Sausalito. They have laws that work perfectly as far as safety that aren't to the outside. It's great that you had in the interior city, the core city or whatever you call it downtown, that you had grants to do all this upgrade to the streets and stuff over the time. But if there's anything going to be done or anybody's going to be able to do anything or to do a build on a site, they're not going to be able to do all of Margaret and all of Paul. That's absurd. That was meant to freeze anything happening, and that's what it did. In fact, one of the people up there interested in doing something actually had plans drafted that the Public Works has approved, doing all these extreme fixes for the street for anyone to do any one project up there. And it did prove, as the city had intended, the people that proposed it, to not be possible. Prohibitively expensive.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up because we do have a 2 minute, 3 minutes that we're trying to stick to, but if you could wrap it up, that'd be great.
I'll do that. So the idea was to have the council recommend or suggest or ask of the planning staff to come up with proposals on hillside street improvements that would not be the excessive demands of currently inside downtown Brisbane, but would allow, a pull out. In other words, you have enough street to allow two cars to pass each other. But for emergency vehicles or something, there'd be pull-outs stationed every so often. So would you have them look into that? I'd appreciate your asking.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker, and we do have a really full agenda tonight, so we are asking to keep to the 3 minutes. And the next speaker is Tom Hines.
It's short. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I know you usually don't like to hear from me, but please bear with me for a couple minutes. I want to tell you something about myself you may not know. I am an astrologer. Now, you may poo-poo astrology and think that it's fortune telling. It is not. It's merely the study of cycles. Over 50 years ago, I chose to study those cycles and learn the symbolic language. And you might say, oh, I don't believe in it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It just is. I don't believe in it either. It just is. I don't believe in war, but it is, isn't it? My 50-plus years of these studies, I've seen how well it works. Carl Jung never accepted a client without doing their horoscope first. It works. Fact check. Saturn is the furthest planet that's visible to the naked eye. In ancient times, they thought of Saturn as the boundary of the solar system, of which the Earth was the center. Today, we know that's not the case, and we know that planets are not gods. But what has remained since the ancient times is the archetypal significations. Saturn as boundary, as in the sculptor who gives form to the marble. Let's look at Saturn's cycle. Pick any date and realize that in 28 to 30 years, Saturn will return to that exact same degree and minute of the zodiac. It takes 28 to 30 because of retrograde motion. No planet ever goes backwards, but because the Earth might move faster than they are, from viewing from the Earth, they appear to go backwards through the zodiac. Looking at that 28-year cycle, I take half of that, 14 years. It's equivalent to the full moon. And we are in high school at that time, and we think we know everything. Half of that is 7 when we first become aware of ourselves. If you add 7 to the other side of the 14, it's 21, society's age of maturation. It is not. It is the return of Saturn to that exact degree and minute that is full maturation. Many authors have written about this, about our development. Now, Saturn begins a new cycle. It's been around once before. It's contacted every planet. Now it's going to do it again. But this time, it does it with understanding. So 28 to 30 years beyond that, we're 56 to 60. And we're starting around the third time. This is known as wisdom. And this is the position where I speak to you from, wisdom. It is not to imply any superiority. It's simply, we're equal human beings. The only difference is I've lived longer. I'm older than Trump. I'm older than Biden. And my cognitive faculties are still intact.
Tom?
I've observed a lot. One sentence. I've observed a lot. I've seen changes for worse outweigh changes for the better. Life experience equals wisdom. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I have a slip from David Schooley, maybe Jason Noonan. I'm not sure if this is for oral communications. It's on the zoning. Okay. That's all the slips I have for oral communications number 1. Is there any other members of the public who'd like to come up? Okay, well, emails don't get on oral communications.
There's a slip
slips.
there for Sherry Goodwin.
Excuse me?
Is it Sherry Goodwin? There's a slip there for Sherry Goodwin. I think Jason filled it out.
Well, no, that's also for the rezoning,
Oh, there's also for
but this
rezoning.
is for
Oh, okay.
a non-agenda item?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I only have one for zoning.
That's okay. Sherry Goodwin, Kings Road. Recently, I was walking my dog on Main Street, right by Julie's Deli and the library. Somebody came up behind, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Pick up your dog." And I look, and like right over by that door, there's a coyote just staring at it. And my dog is 9 pounds, so I was able to pick it up. But it was pretty scary. And I think within this past week, a woman was harassed by a coyote on Quarry Road. She had a stroller with a baby and her dog, and the coyote wouldn't go away when she yelled at it. And also, I think it was within the past week, a child was bitten in Golden Gate Park. I just think it's time to admit we have a bit of a coyote problem. On this town, they've gone from being on the mountain to being on my street, where I'm often afraid to walk and have to turn around, to on the main street of town and in the parks where our children and grandchildren are playing. And, you know, they're on Facebook so much, they might as well have their own page, the Coyote Resident Facebook page. But they are rapidly proliferating, And in the past, you know, I've talked to city officials and they say, get an air horn. But from what I've read on Facebook, you know, the hazing isn't working as well as it used to. So I am asking our city officials to please discuss whether contacting professional wildlife damage management specialists, and they're employed by federal, state, or county agencies. And just if they could obtain information and report back to Brisbane residents about perhaps reducing the coyote population in a way that is humane, because they are, you know, they're just like everywhere. And so I'm going to run out the clock with a few incidents from Facebook on coyote encounters. And I'm not saying that people agree with me that something needs to be done, but I'm just using their statements on Facebook. Jody Lynn Borghese, a coyote's in my yard. Bring your cats in. Rosemary Slade, our 17-pound cat Jimmy was just mauled by a coyote. Kathy Wall, I was just walking Scruffy on Solano Street. A woman driving up the block stopped, jumped out of her car, and she ran up the stairs to a stranger's house. Sheila Dizon Burns, she was walking her pugs, approached by two coyotes on Mission Blue. She used an air horn, but one was aggressive and stayed, despite the air horn, until a good Samaritan helped her shoo it away. This was a few years ago. Renee Marmion, or also known as Renee Bovo, her dog was attacked by a coyote while it was on a leash, while she was walking it. Michelle Salmon, she wrote that she saw a coyote as she was driving back into town. She honked and hollered, and he didn't even flinch. And then Ellen Chandler. Yes, it's kind of a drag not wanting to have pets anymore because of the coyotes. And I get the creep sometimes going out for a walk or a jog by myself when I know that coyotes are living all around where I walk.
Thank you.
They're getting bolder. And
Thank you.
I know people are feeding them. Maybe we need to crack down on that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, we have a hand raised from Chris.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. We're just about 2 months away from the launch of the Caltrain electric train service. And not only will these new trains reduce Caltrain's emissions, they'll also shorten the length of most trips. For example, 18 minutes will be shaved off a trip from Brisbane to San Jose Diridan. The improved speed of the trains and the shorter dwell times are also going to make it possible for Caltrain to nearly double the frequency of train service to the Bayshore station. We'll go from 1 train each hour to 2 an hour, including the weekends. The feature I am most looking forward to is that these trains will be closer to platform level, making it easier to board with a heavy bike or easier to board, period. For many of my trips, this solves the first mile, last mile difficulty of using Caltrain. That's all the good news. And maybe we can avoid some of the bad news. We know that the Bayshore station could use some care and attention. We had a period of several months beginning in December of last year where the elevators were out of service. The visual messaging signs, the VMS signs, are often out. And yesterday when I tried to tag off on returning to the Bayshore station, I found that 2 of the clipper card readers on the northbound platform were not working. I know every time this happens, I do notify them, but I'm wondering why the station is consistently in such poor shape. And I may have stumbled on one possible reason. I've been attending the various public Caltrain meetings via Zoom, including the local policymaker group. It lists for the City of Brisbane, Terry O'Connell as our representative and Cliff Lentz as our alternate, respectively. As far as I'm able to determine, Terry did attend one of these meetings about a year ago, but we've not had representation since then. I know how busy you can be, but if we're going to name a delegate, it should be someone who can fulfill that role. That advisory group, by the way, has been inviting the cities along the corridor to plan some celebratory events as we get closer to September. So I hope we can do something about that. there's another aspect of this, and that's the commute.org shuttles. Getting to work is a rote activity, and if that rote activity is going to get interrupted by a schedule change, we should let employees that work in Brisbane and citizens, the residents of Brisbane, know about this as soon as possible. The next commute.org meeting that I can attend is 3 days before the launch of these new trains. Can we get, and I've tried to call commute.org and see what that shuttle schedule is going to be, and as a simple resident, I'm not getting any answers. Can we help our employers and our residents, our employees in Brisbane and our residents, find out how they're going to be impacted? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members online who'd like to speak on oral communications number 1?
I see no hands raised, Madam Mayor.
Okay, last chance, and we will move on. So thank you. And we will move to the consent calendar. I have had requests to move they've removed all of the items. Can I get an approval on item D, E, F, and G?
So moved.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, do we need to do a roll call because Cliff is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Council-
roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye.
So we're gonna discuss H also?
Yes, these were items that were pulled, so that we will do H now, and then we'll do the election issues and come back. So item H, adopting the Countywide and City of Brisbane Local Roadway Safety Plan and accompanying Vision Zero goal. Brief staff report, please.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, I'll stay close. Through in the past about year at least, CCAG initiated with consultants Kittleson and Circle Point to develop a local roadway safety plan for all of the jurisdictions within the county that did not have one. A couple of jurisdictions, I believe, had already developed their own. They went through a lengthy process with staff from all the involved agencies, starting with kickoff and the next step was getting feedback from the public. They did a bunch of tabling and pop-up events about what concerns were. And then they put together an online web map for people to be able to populate it with their concerns about safety in roadways and for pedestrians and bicycles. And then they did more pop-up events, and they were at the Brisbane Farmers Market in, January of this year. And then finally, they had the draft plan available and did a bunch of outreach on their website, and staff was involved very much through the process. So then they finalized the local roadway safety plan and Vision Zero goal, and CCAG adopted it last month in June, and they asked the other public agencies to also adopt this plan. One piece, other than obviously making roadways safer for vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles, and any mode of transportation, is that it does help us go after certain safety grants. And obviously, we all want that. They looked at a couple of areas in detail. They worked with cities, and they focused on the high injury network and the ones that were the most problematic, and made a bunch of suggestions for implementation of improvements to make those areas safer.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Mackin, I believe you had a question for staff?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Karen, for that staff report, and I applaud all the efforts in this regard of CCAG. what kind of struck me with this is I'm constantly asked questions about what are we doing about this street, that street, Bayshore, safety. And I know that there was a lot of public outreach with this. There was an online survey. I even participated in that. I wanted us to maybe consider, so I'm not asking for a question tonight, but I think that there was so much material in this staff report and maybe that our own staff could offer in reflection on how we're addressing this report. I'd like to see this be considered for future agenda so that the public could have more of this in-depth information and our response for how we are going to implement some of these suggestions, because we are applying for grants. And I think it might just help inform the public and also give them an opportunity to give us feedback.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, this kind of setting didn't lend itself to going into the details right now, but we'd be happy to do that in a future meeting, yeah.
Just maybe like a workshop format.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I did have a question on page 42 of our packet, 21 of 44 of this particular agenda item. It said Brisbane had 69 fatal and injury crashes on at-grade facilities between 2018 and 2022. I've never heard anything like that.
What page? 42.
Page 42.
Without getting to that page, I remember, and I thought we put in the resolution that we had 12. We had no fatalities, but these were also serious injury. So we had 12 in that 4-year period.
Well, the slides show that we had 69 fatal and injury crashes during that time.
Flipping through virtually.
Does that include 101?
I would believe it would not include 101. I don't think that's in our jurisdiction, so.
It shows state highway, but state highway designation might include Bayshore because it used to be a state highway.
It says local in Brisbane.
Yes. It did seem like a contradiction.
Yes, it's on the diagram page.
It could also show up for you, Karen, as 21 of 44.
That's definitely not right. That's an error in the document.
Sorry.
Okay, well, I mean, we should just make sure that we have the right trending and reports in there. Does anyone else have a question for staff?
No, thank you.
Cliff? No? Madison? Okay, with that, would we like to adopt the resolution adopting the Countywide and City of Brisbane Local Roadway Safety Plan and accompanying Vision Zero goal? Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
You're like, Cliff.
You're a little bit late because of the time delay.
Beat you
but,
to it, Cliff, sorry.
But with that, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz?
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin?
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Thank you. With that, it's going to take me just a second to pull out the section that we're moving on to, which is going to be old business item Q, having to do with election processes.
I'd ask to pull this for discussion.
Did we,
We approved
But we're-
through H,
right,
and then
and I
there's
think they,
IJK. I wanted to pull that for discussion.
I think that the staff had pulled it for discussion, so it's gonna be after we do this.
Got it. Got
The
it.
other items that were in consent calendar that were pulled are gonna go after this item.
Got it.
So that we don't keep the public for people who are on this issue.
Madam Mayor, can staff just read the numbers that were pulled?
They weren't pulled, the items that were pulled for discussion were items H, I, J, and K.
Thank you. Just want to make sure there was an oral record. Thanks.
No worries, thank you. So we're gonna move on to old business Q, which is election issues. And can I get a staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Michael Roush, Legal Counsel. I'll give the staff report, and certainly with help from Mr. McMorrow to chime in as appropriate. The first item concerns a potential resolution to place on the November 5th, 2024 ballot an ordinance establishing term limits for city council members. Currently, the term of each council member shall be a term for 4 years from the time each member is elected. Currently, city council members in Brisbane may serve an unlimited number of terms. State law, however, permits a city council to adopt a proposal to limit the number of terms a member of council may serve on the city council. Any such proposal shall apply prospectively only and shall not be operative unless it is submitted to the voters at a regularly scheduled election and a majority of the voters cast on the question that they favored the proposal. At its meeting in June, City Council asked staff to prepare a proposal along that same lines, which we have done. As proposed, it would limit the number of consecutive terms that a council member could serve to 3. Such person then would not be eligible to run for another term of office for a 2-year period, after which the person would be eligible to run again and could serve another consecutive 3 years. In addition, council directed that any proposal provide that any term of office for which a person is elected or appointed to fill a vacancy would not count as one of the 3 terms. That proposal has been drafted and is set forth in the attached resolution. And the resolution, in order for the item to be on the November 5th ballot, council must adopt the resolution 88 days before the election, which is August 9th. So accordingly, you could adopt if the council feels this is appropriate, it could be done at tonight's meeting or at a regular meeting on August 1st or at a special meeting before the August 9th deadline. As indicated, the proposal, if approved by a majority of the voters who vote on the matter, would apply to the terms of office for the 3 council members who are elected in November of 2024. It would not apply to the current terms of office for 2 council members, Councilmember Davis and O'Connell, whose terms of office run through 2026. The resolution does authorize City Council to submit arguments and rebuttals for or against the ordinance, and those arguments and rebuttals would need to be submitted according to a time schedule that the city clerk would provide. And finally, just to again mention that if the ordinance receives a majority vote of those voting on it, the ordinance will be in effect and could only be changed by a future vote of the electorate. That concludes the staff report. I'll be glad to answer any clarifying questions.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for staff?
No.
Questions for
No.
staff? No.
Ingrid's gonna grab me the attachment because it wasn't in our packet, but I didn't have a chance to pick it up. But I remember at the last meeting, Mayor O'Connell asked that it be 3 full terms of 4 years, and that any partial terms would not count toward the 3. So I don't know. Ingrid's gonna bring it, but I just want to see if that language was updated.
I believe it was updated.
Correct. The way that the ordinance reads is that if let's say there's a vacancy and a person is elected to that or is appointed by the council to fill out that term, that would not count as a term of office for purposes of counting the 3. So let's say the vacancy occurred halfway through a term, person's appointed. If that person decided to run again, the person could run for 3 consecutive terms after that. It would not count as one of the 3 consecutive terms. I think that answers your question, but maybe,
I think that was, it was whether it was included in the draft
it
language.
is. It is included in the ordinance. I think it's under subsection C, I believe, of the ordinance. Just double check that.
Okay, I'll jump in.
Okay. I
Subsection
don't
C.
think we have any other questions for staff, but we should open it up for the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this? Paul Biscow?
Paul Buscal, Brisbane resident. I have a couple things to read. So, honorable council members, I am representing the group of 41 citizens that sent you the letter in January to review, research, and consider term limits and mayor role in a rotation or elect a at-large position. Today, as a matter of public record, we have now resent you another letter to take action tonight with a request to get this on the ballot. And I'll just read the letter that was sent a couple days ago to you. Brisbane City Council, in January, 41 citizens signed a letter asking you to research the potential of having term limits, which we talked about, but I don't think we talked about electing a mayor. So electing a mayor, and we won't talk about the by-district elections at this point, because that was something that the subcommittees decided wasn't something we should pursue at this point. So after numerous subcommittee meetings and council meetings, the time has come to make a decision on whether or not to allow the people of Brisbane the opportunity to vote on term limits and a firm rotation for mayor. To implement term limits requires a vote of the people, which requires the city council to place the item on the ballot. Though a firm rotation of mayor is not required to be placed on the ballot, only a vote in favor of the rotation by the people of Brisbane can make the rotation the law of the land. We do not want the issues of the past to again have the citizens of Brisbane, which has happened for many years to many different council members. The citizens of Brisbane question whether favoritism and or infighting is a reason for someone to be skipped over. We want elected officials to be fair and respect a firm rotation in representing our city. As our public servants, we ask that you place both items on the November 2024 ballot. Please trust and respect the citizens of Brisbane to decide for themselves on whether or not to implement term limits for city council members and vote to validate a firm rotation for mayor. We trust you to make decisions on our behalf. Please respect us to make decisions on your roles as elected officials. And then I'll just continue on because I wanted to read that letter. I know that you've read it, but just for the public as well. So although we have appreciated all the work that subcommittee of Madison Davis and Cliff Lentz have provided to the council, this has been on the agenda every month for 5 months. We are now at a deadline to get this on the November ballot. To our city attorney's point about the 9th, August 9th. We want both of these issues brought to the people to vote on. We need you, the city council, to respect that a large group of residents have asked you to move this forward. This has generated much needed conversation in the community and change should be embraced. There should be no additional cost of implementing these elections processes into our city bylaws. Finally, we are asking you to bring both of these to the ballot for the people to vote on. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will note that the second letter that he read first had 22 signatures. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak in the audience? Seeing none. Oh, please go ahead, Michelle Salmon.
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident. Although term limits, I think they're fine. I do not agree with setting up a formal rotation for mayor. The mayor's job is the council selects the mayor who leads the council. And that's how it has been for many, many years. And there's been very few instances where someone hasn't gotten to be mayor. And I don't think that having that legislated and set in stone is a good idea. And so I'm in favor of leaving it the way that it is now, where it's not grammar school. You have to earn the respect and trust of your fellow council to be the leader of the council. It doesn't give you any more or less power in terms of the actual running of the city of Brisbane. So that's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Are we just as a council gonna discuss term limits and then?
They're separate issues.
Okay, because the public comments are talking about both, so I didn't know if we're
Well,
gonna
the
do
first
one and then
couple,
we're gonna do the other.
the one was a letter that addressed both issues. And I think we can retrain it till we discuss the second issue, but
Okay.
We wouldn't need to hear the letter again.
Yeah.
But I think we're taking it one at a time because they're very different.
Okay.
And they have different impacts. So again, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this issue? If not, I'll take it over to the
We have a
online.
We have a hands raised by Chris.
Please go ahead, Chris.
Hi, yes, this is Chris Larkowski. I'm deeply concerned, and I appreciate Councilmember Davis's clarification here on this particular piece of public comment. I do not see the direct line correlation between the problem statement and this solution. I also do not see people lining up to become, to get into this role. These roles are very challenging. And I think we're going to create a far more brittle government in Brisbane at a period of time where we really need stability. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online that would like to speak on this issue?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on that. And moving on to discussion. As far as the term limits, I'm going to kick it off and then we'll go to the rest of it. For term limits, for me, I think that if we limit it to 3 terms, while we could send that to the voters, it's a big cost. It's, going to be $30,000 thereabouts to take that to the voters. And while that may seem like a drop in the bucket in a larger amount of money that the city is spending on a day-to-day basis, term limits, people can vote with their vote when they go to vote for someone. If someone is past their shelf life, so to speak, and they feel there's a candidate that can do better for them, they can do that. And if we as a council individually think that 12 years and we're done, we can decide not to run if we think after 12 years we're ineffective. And one of the things I've found is on the subcommittees, we're running into leadership problems on the subcommittees that are countywide. We have San Francisco Roundtable that deals with airport noise. And moving forward, I'm going to be the vice chair on 2 of the committees, and they're trying to make me the chair because all of our talented people are termed out because their cities have rules that keep them from having longer than X amount of terms. And it's scary to me to think I'm going to be the person with the most historical knowledge in that room. And that's scary to me because there's so many people that are so much smarter than me that should still be able to be playing in that role. So does anybody else have any comments to add to this?
You all look at me. You want me to go first?
Oh, no, I went first.
Okay. This is really an interesting issue to me because I gave this lots of thought. And when people take the time to come to meetings, and some of you have come here over and over, and I hear what you're saying, and I've been in your seats before too, And I've been online years ago and putting together groups to say, well, we need to do this. So I hear the sentiments, but as someone in another council said to me, it's really difficult because you get people who come to the meeting and they're like, by God, this is what we need to do. And you're responsible to everybody that didn't come to the meeting too. So you can't just listen to the people that come and rattle the cage at the meeting. And I don't mean that in a bad way. So I've tried to go out of my way to talk to other people. And what I'm getting from the other half of our residents is, why would we want to spend this money? We've had people that were on the council. So I looked up a little bit and I spoke to Clark Conway. Clark was on the council for 23 years. He kept getting reelected. Steve Waldo, 18 and a half years. Lee Panza, 16. Cy Boligoff, 16. Seppi Richardson, 15. And our own Cliff Lentz has been here 15 years now. So obviously there was a reason Brisbane kept electing them. So my concern, I guess if I'm to look at both sides, if we'd had this room really filled all the time with people going, yes, I want this, put it on the ballot, and we got a big petition, I would go, maybe we should think about it. But I'm also looking at cost, as Terry is, because it's not cheap to put things on the ballot anymore. And I do think that the voters vote term limits if they just don't elect you. And that's happened in Brisbane before. It has happened. And I would say every one of us could say, if we believe in this on this council, and we could each say, this is what I believe. I've only been here not quite 4 years. I will not be here 12 years. I can tell you that tonight. I absolutely will not be here more than 12 years. We can self-impose our own guidelines if we believe in this. So I think that the idea is not necessarily bad, but I'm also concerned, do we have enough people really willing then to fill these spots? We have trouble sometimes filling committees and commissions, and I don't know that everyone realizes being on the city council is a 7-day-a-week job. And it doesn't end at 5 p.m.
With no pay,
with
basically.
With no pay, basically. So if you have a regular job, and Cliff, I don't know how you're doing it, it's really tough. I don't have a regular job anymore because when I ran for this office, I said, there's no way I can do both. So that's just what it is. I'm very concerned because one of the things you don't know until you get on the council, and I was on San Mateo County, the civil grand jury, and the citizens committee here, and the complete streets, and the planning commission, and you don't know until you get on the council what you really don't know. And there's a lot, even with all the background I had. So to take someone who hasn't had the benefit of going through a little bit of exposure, I'm very concerned about that. I'm very encouraged by something else that I haven't heard anyone bring up. And that is that we have, as a council, I think, gone out of our way to look at our committees and commissions. And we say, are they reflecting the diversity in Brisbane? Well, I know some years back they weren't. They are now. And I think almost every council member here and there will tell me they've talked to people on committees and commissions. Say, you know, are you gonna stay here? Because someday you should think about being on the council. And I can tell you with certainty, I know of at least 2 people representing new and growing minorities in Brisbane who already have told me they plan to run for the council. But here's the other part of it. They don't want to run now. They are in the middle of the high point of their career. So it might be another election, 1 more, or it could be 2 more. But they're waiting in the wings. They're anxious to do it, and I know they're going to. And they're getting the benefit of serving on committees and commissions, which will prepare them. And then they already know as well, it's a real-time commitment. And it's not just the time, it's not showing up and deciding, but it's that time commitment because it's a responsibility to all of you when you take this on. And you can't just say, I don't feel like it, or it wasn't what I thought it was. You want someone that demonstrates they really are willing to put the time in and do it for you. that they're going to come through. Not that they just thought, oh, I'll run, but that they're really going to do it. So I would prefer, because of the cost and what I said, we parked this. Now, if the citizens wish to still bring this back, I am totally amenable with considering it again. But at this time, because I'm hearing both sides from the residents and I'm not getting a sense that it's weighing one more or the other, I'd like to see everyone really think about this carefully. Thank you.
You want to go ahead? No, we've closed public comment. I'm not sure. What's that? Yeah, we'll do a second on the other item we'll be talking about later. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I do need to speak first, Dana. Thank you. The other thing that is very concerning to me is I'm on two of the heaviest hitting boards in the county. The JPA library, we run all of the libraries in the county. We have the biggest budget in the counties. And I have 7 new members on that board right now who have never served on anything else. And they say nothing and they contribute nothing because they're brand new. And having a couple of new people come in, but we've got people who've termed out that had all the institutional knowledge that I can't even go to anymore and say, help. And all of these brand new people who look to me for the answers when I'm still looking for the answers. So that bothers me a lot relative to this particular topic. And then trying to get a quorum together. Everybody has decided, whether the state likes it or not, that attending meetings from home is the thing to do. And we are not getting quorums at these meetings to make really important countywide decisions very, very often, which means we're driving to Woodside, we're driving to Redwood City, we're going to whatever place you want to say, and we're driving our own time, our own gas, whatever it is, and we don't have a quorum, we have to turn around and come home. So, and that is part of the fact that there is terming out. Millbrae right now has a recall election this month because of things that went on relative to people terming out and other people coming in and not doing the right thing. So the well is deep for the holes we could fall in on this one item.
Madison or Cliff?
I can go. You know, I really could go either way on it. I see the merits of both arguments. You know, speaking from my own experience, when I came on the city council, we had Clark, Terry, and Cliff, and to have that institutional knowledge was super beneficial for me as I'm, you know, was learning the ropes. However, I do really want to respect the request that's come from many members of the public. And I think that with a lot of issues, it can be hard to tell which way our citizens are going to go. And I think Measure JJ is like a really good example of that, because it was really hard to predict how that was going to play out. And for me, because I don't feel strongly either way that one option is clearly like the right choice. I'm okay with letting our voters weigh in. I'm not afraid of anything. You know, if they implement term limits, then that's the decision, and people who want to run can take a 2-year break and come back. Clark did that. He may have not done that on like a 12-year schedule, but he did take a break. And I think that being on the city council for a long period of time can certainly weigh on you. I think, you know, taking a rest period is beneficial, but everyone's different, of course, and everyone's life is different. So for me, I am happy to let the voters weigh in. That's been the request, and whatever they decide is the right choice. And with respect to the budget, it says, staff estimates that the cost to place 1 or 2 items on the ballot would be in the range of $19,000 to $27,000. There are funds in the city's clerk the city clerk's budget for this purpose. So to me, to make it a cost issue, the money's already budgeted, and I'm happy to let the chips fall where they may.
Cliff?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. You know, the position of institutional wisdom and experience, I totally get that. And Clark was a mentor for me, and I was really glad that he was on the council when I was elected back in 2009. But I also, you know, understand our position, which is being a public servant, and that the public, I feel, in areas where it's, you know, there's direction in regards to our roles, you know, that we play in interacting with the community. Maybe it makes more sense for the public to weigh in on that. We've had people from our community write letters, be a part of a letter, and we know that those people that have signed the letter, they've contributed greatly to our community. They're people that have made our community better. I think of them as leaders in our community, and they asked us to do the research, find out what other cities are doing. One of the things that we looked at the subcommittee level was, should we do 2 terms or should we do 3 terms? Because some cities in San Mateo County have 2 terms and others have 3. And we felt that by having 3 terms, the first term, you're getting your feet wet, you're learning the job. The second term, you're able to move things forward that are priorities for you, or you try, right, to work with your council colleagues to initiate. And then, you know, we all know that things take a long time in government, and that third term is, you know, you're trying to get, you know, those things that you're passionate about, and along with the community, over the finish line. But there's that ability to set out just one election cycle, only 2 years, and then run again. The last thing I just want to point out is that, you know, as incumbents, we have the advantage. The data from, you know, all across the county, all across the state, all across the nation, is that when incumbents run, they have an advantage. And so what we're looking at is, okay, as we as a council, can we implement things that allow new people, new blood, you know, an easier chance, right? Maybe a chance that, you know, levels the playing field, you know, to come in and provide opportunity to give vision and direction for the community that they live in. So I'm inclined to move forward with putting this on the ballot. You know, all of the comments that have been raised, perhaps not moving it forward, you know, that can be in the rebuttal, right? I think we need to trust our community, trust our citizens, that they can make good decisions, but we should give them all the information in the voting material so that then they make wise decisions with all the information before them. So I'm inclined to move forward, putting it on the ballot. Thank you.
Okay. Colleen?
I think there's one other point, just thinking about having a full scope in a decision. This is a big decision. When I look at the other cities that have implemented term limits, they're over 12,000 in population. We have something like, 2,800 registered voters? So in a city that's much bigger, it's easier to get more candidates. You've got more people involved. Some of larger cities' committees and commissions are 7 people, 10 people. We have committees and commissions of 5 people. And I think my concern, again, I'm going to echo, is it's nothing to take away a decision of the voters, because they always have the decision. And I don't think that Brisbane has been stagnant. I haven't been here 4 years. And in terms of generations, Madison got elected. So I think Brisbane is eager to embrace that change. I'm just very concerned about the talent pool and what we have to draw from. That could end up being a huge problem. It's been a problem in other cities that are much larger already. So I think be careful what you ask for. I'm not trying to be stodgy about it, but I have real concerns that there may be unintended consequences we didn't count on. Thank you.
Anybody else?
If I may, Terry.
Sure.
I like to comment on what you just said, Colin. If Clark Conway decided to run for one more term, I'm not sure if he would have run. And because he decided not to run, there was an opening, and you ran, and you were able to get on the council. Not to say, not to diminish your campaign, energy and strategy or anything like that, but it would have been difficult. And thank goodness for your sake, Clark decided not to run, and it opened up a door. And it's interesting, when there is an open seat, you get more people running. You get more choices typically for our citizens to choose from. And so that's what it's about, I feel, is giving the public more choices. Giving folks that want to run. You even mentioned you have some folks that you've talked to, they'd like to run. They might say that it's because of time they can't do it. But I've also talked to people who said they'd like to run, but they know how difficult it is going against incumbents, and it's a lot easier to run for an open seat. And so that's probably like the biggest motivator for me, is to have something in place that then opens up spots, that then allowing it easier for new people to come in and serve on the city council.
I think historically, you, me, Karen all ran when there were open seats, and Terry and Cliff maybe ousted incumbents, right? It's been a long time ago.
I beat my initial term. I beat an incumbent that had been here for 18 years. But the voters knew that candidate was past his prime, and that he was not up to the task anymore, to the ability that he could have been. And that's sad to say, but that's how the vote went. I was elected because the people perceived me as a better candidate. And it's interesting because I am not going to run again, and I will make that declaration now, that there will be an incumbent seat open in the 2026 election. And there could be, if these rules were in place today, there would be an incumbent seat open today. And that incumbent could make that seat open for this election period, if he so chooses, and if he felt that that is the role to get new blood into the council. Again, my big concern is the historical knowledge and the name recognition that you get when you're on subcommittees, and when you lose that because of term limits. Personally, it's not going to make a difference to me. I would vote no, and I'm not even for wasting the money to put it on the ballot, because I think it's a bad policy for Brisbane. But again, I will call the question if someone wants to make the motion to put this to the ballot.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
And there's a second. All those in favor?
I think we have to do a roll call.
Roll call vote, please.
One.
This is just one item.
Just one item.
Roll call vote, Councilmember Cunningham? Councilmember Davis,
Yes, I.
Councilmember Lenz,
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin,
No.
Mayor O'Connell.
No. Thank you. And then we will go ahead and move on to the item about the mayor rotation.
Yes, thank you,
And can
Madam
we
Mayor.
get a
Michael Roush
staff
again,
report
legal
on that,
counsel.
please?
The issue here is a discussion whether to adopt a resolution to place on the November 5th, 2024 ballot an ordinance to establish procedures by which City Council will appoint the mayor and mayor pro tem. The mayor and pro tem in a general law city such as Brisbane are selected by a vote of the members of the City Council. The council currently has adopted a resolution setting guidelines for the selection of mayor and mayor pro tem. That resolution provides that serving as mayor and mayor pro tem is a privilege and not a right, and states that whenever possible, each council member shall have the opportunity to serve as mayor during the council member's first term of office, and whenever possible, the city council shall select the then current mayor pro tem as the next mayor. However, these are guidelines, and there's no guarantee that every city council member is guaranteed that he or she will have the opportunity to serve as mayor. Council requested staff to put together an ordinance that could be submitted to the voters at the November election that would replace the above guidelines with clear direction as to how the mayor and mayor pro tem are appointed. In general terms, the ordinance would set up a rotation by which council members would be appointed as mayor and mayor pro tem, thereby guaranteeing a city council member will have the opportunity to serve as mayor. And that ordinance is attached to the, proposed ordinance is attached. There's no resolution at this time. Note that that proposed ordinance has a subsection D that references a procedure by which council members may be removed as mayor and other council members may be moved down on the mayor rotation list. This document is a product of discussions by the Ad hoc Code of Conduct Subcommittee, Council members Lentz and Madison, concerning the grounds, timing, and consequences regarding removing the mayor as mayor or moving a council member down on the rotation list. That document was attached to the agenda report for the council's consideration. And again, as before, if the council decides that it wants to place this item on the November ballot, it would need to adopt a resolution prior to August 9th. Therefore, because there's no resolution accompanying this, the council would need to schedule either a regular meeting on August 1st or a special meeting between now and August 9th to adopt such a resolution. Again, if the ordinance was put on, it would have to be approved by a majority of those voting on the ordinance in order to be in effect, and it would apply to the procedure concerning the appointment of mayor for 2025 and thereafter. Unlike the prior item, which would require voter approval if term limits were going to be established, City Council itself could implement this procedure by adopting an ordinance or a resolution rather than taking the item to the voters, but those procedures adopted by the council could then be changed by a vote of a future council. That concludes the agenda report. I'd be glad to answer any clarifying questions.
Great, thank you very much. Is there any questions for staff?
I have none.
Cliff?
Not at this time.
Okay, great, thank you. Public comment. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak on this? Please, Dana.
Madam Mayor, with all due respect, I thank Madison for mentioning that that there are funds in the city clerk budget to run elections, and it shouldn't matter whether it's 15 items on the election or 2. And so I have had the experience where we have petitioned the city to do things which have had to come before an election. And if you're talking about the cost to the city, I object to the city using public funds to write the objections or the rebuttals, depending upon whether it's a pro or con, it would be the support of or against the measure, and then the rebuttals to the support, that the city spends their money fighting the citizens with our city attorney writing the so-called information that Cliff said is you're producing all the information. I object to, quote unquote, you spending money, taxpayer dollars, in producing the information that goes into the rebuttals in our election process. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members? Please, Tom.
Hi, thanks again. What about the idea of expanding the council so that you aren't so stretched out with all these committees? And it would be a good way to have new people get acclimated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public here in the audience that would like to speak? Do we have anyone online that would like to speak?
Chris, Madam Mayor, would like to speak.
Sure, please go ahead.
Hello, Chris Borkowski here. Thank you so much for letting me contribute to this conversation. I have tried to go back into some of the city council recordings to try and understand the circumstances.
Chris, can you
that
speak up,
happened.
please?
Yeah, to try
Thank you.
and understand circumstances that led to this request for this ordinance. And I cannot help but notice how legal counsel stepped in many of the early conversations. And
Chris, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Can you please speak up?
It's muffled. It's muffled. Is what it is. It's muffled.
Okay. Is this any better?
Oh, that's way better.
Much better.
Good. Okay. I've noticed that legal counsel steps in on these conversations and suggests that we can't discuss them. I don't know what's going on, but it's a concern to me, and I respect legal counsel's decision. I am not asking for any more information. I think that we need to take care here, and it's another place where we're creating a potential for a very brittle government. It's a small community. We should be able to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public online? So we'll close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Please, Michelle Salmon.
I know I spoke about this too soon in the wrong thing, but I really don't feel like 41 people or 22 people, not that their opinion's not valid, represents a majority of the people of Brisbane or the voters of Brisbane. And I feel like we have so many really urgent and important issues to discuss, and this isn't one of them. And it just hurts my heart that this distractor task has come before you when we've had a perfectly good working we've been able to handle it all these years, and all of a sudden it becomes this hotbed issue with 22 people and 41 people signing a petition. If we had 200 people who signed a petition, then I would be, yeah, okay, that's a good majority of the voters that, not a majority, but a good number of the voters that really want this. I think that the way we have it and it has worked. We've had mayors in the past who sat on the council for a really long time doing their personal business that I watched them in the camera, and then came up for mayor and didn't get chosen. And then when they finally did get chosen, because they whined about it, didn't know how to run a meeting. And we sat here till midnight every Monday night because they didn't know how to run a meeting. Didn't even know basic rules of order after being on the council for several years. And so sometimes it is justified when someone doesn't get their turn. It's not grade school. You don't always get your turn. Okay? You have to earn it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue? And no one else online? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. And besides my usual objections, I'm gonna let somebody else go first. Karen.
I might be able to nip this one in the bud and put it away immediately. I do know the reason why we are where we are today, and yes, I cannot discuss it, and that's fine. But I think I have a resolution. The resolution number 2016-06, which was the resolution of the City Council of the City of Brisbane setting guidelines, for the selection of mayor and mayor pro tem that was written back in 2016 is a fine document. I don't think we should change it. The extra language that's in this proposed new document does not float my boat in one little bit. So I think I have a resolution that we all might be able to live with. I am the mayor pro tem, so if we are going in strict rotation, I would be the mayor next year. What I'm willing to do tonight, right here, in front of y'all, is to say that we could promote Councilmember Lentz to the mayor, and that would probably make all of this go away. And I would like to stay as mayor pro tem. That's what I'm willing to offer. Thank you. I'm done.
Cliff, would you like to go next, or somebody else?
If you wouldn't mind, Terry, choosing someone else, I need to kind of, just thought process that for just a second.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Colleen or Madison?
I feel like I talked a lot the last meeting, and I really want to be respectful of everyone having an opportunity to say what they want to say before I say anything. So if you'd like to go.
Okay. For the record, we asked Councilmember Lentz to be mayor pro tem when we met last November, and he refused. And that was a genuine effort to make sure he would be back in the rotation. So he had his reasons, but I think we need to get back to the rotation. As for the difficulty we had where the public wanted some answers and we were unable to give people answers because of legalities, I think that it would behoove us to have some sort of a commitment to the city, to the public, to each other in the form of guidelines. And I've been researching guidelines that other cities in the peninsula have, and it simply states, this is the commitment we make to do X, Y, Z. And if we don't make it, sometimes they list consequences. Some of them do, some of them don't. But Brisbane's never had that. And I think it's a big omission, and the public wants to know. So why wouldn't we do that? And if we as a council or any other future incoming council members didn't want to commit to that, they wouldn't be forced to. But I mean, why wouldn't you want to make that commitment to the public and state, here's what you can expect of us. Here's what we can expect of each other. So there's no mystery about how all these things work. And that's what I would recommend. I don't have a problem going back to a strict rotation so long as I think that there probably are some instances that maybe even our city attorney might recommend be included. I don't know if that's legal. If not, then maybe we don't mention anything. But I think the public deserves to have that commitment in writing. That's what I would suggest.
Are you ready yet, Cliff?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, Karen, I want to thank you for putting forth the offer. I appreciate that. When Madison and I signed up for this subcommittee on election issues, the goal was to put forth some guidelines that allowed us as a council to maybe step back from the process and have something that that the voters could weigh in on. And one of the things that's in the staff report, that talks about the guidelines, and I don't have any problems with the guidelines. It's just that in the guidelines, US says that there's no guarantee. And whereas if it goes before the voters, then there is that guarantee. During our last meeting, there was a discussion about having a code of conduct. And I totally agree with that. I think the council should have an exit ramp in case there was someone on the council who does something significant to warrant the removal of the mayor or to lose their spot in the rotation. And so, it kind of goes back to the last item that we addressed, and that was, do we give the voters the say, or do we decide that we should not do that, and instead we be the decision makers in this particular process? So, just as I guess a commitment as a council member, is to show up to meetings prepared, to work with all of you in a constructive and responsible and professional manner. And I feel we all do that. And by having something in place that is objective, right, where there isn't an opportunity for a majority of the council to change the trajectory unless it clearly warrants that. I think I think it undermines that connection with the public, and that the public votes us all in, and they all expect us to work together on their behalf. And I think they know that when we serve as the mayor, we are getting that kind of confirmation from all of us that we choose you to be in this role because you were elected, and you have the skills and the qualifications to do the job, and that's where it should be. So so I'm inclined to move it forward, but I also understand the positions that you all take to about not doing. Thank you.
Sorry, do we have some sort of piano going on in the background? It sounds like a piano or some sort of time warp machine.
I think it's the lobby where he is probably.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I was thinking it was feedback in the
Cliff's just giving us entertainment along
entertainment.
Playing piano.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and Madison, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd love to. so when this idea was initially brought forth, it was as a directly elected mayor. And that's something initially I was like, about, for a variety of reasons. And those became even more abundantly clear as Cliff and I started researching what goes on in other cities and how there's cities with directly elected rogue mayors that are very difficult to get rid of. But for me personally, I really wanted to figure out if there was a way to address some of these concerns from citizens, but in a way that also felt like Brisbane and felt close to what we've been doing. And so to me, that solution was having a strict rotation. And, at the last meeting, it became really clear of at least 2 council members' preference to have a code of conduct attached to that rotation. And I think that that's very sound feedback. And it's important because you may run into a situation where there is somebody who does something and that makes them unfit to be the mayor. And so I really thought a lot about what were instances that could occur that we could all agree would be reasons, and the public could agree would be reasons why somebody should not have the title of mayor. And those things are separate from a lot of codes of conduct that cities have. They say, we'll strive to respect each other. Mm-hmm. And that's my definition of respect. Your definition of respect is so different. And so that allows things that are vague like that or subjective, allows councils to say, well, I feel like that you've been very disrespectful to me in meetings, and therefore you don't have the qualities that it takes to be mayor. Or to say, I feel like you can't run a meeting well. That's an opinion versus a fact. And is that a big enough reason? Is that egregious enough that a council might have to sit around for an extra hour or two because a mayor can't run a meeting that well, as a reason to deny them the ability to have that opportunity? And so for me, and I think it's important for the public to understand what we're talking about. So if you don't mind, I'd like to read some of these things. So the grounds for removing a council member as mayor or changing a council member's position on the mayoral rotational list. If a city council member or any other council member is alleged to have behaved in a manner inconsistent with their office within 30 days of the alleged behavior having come to the city's attention, the disinterested members of the city council shall hear the allegation and determine by majority vote whether the allegation warrants further review. If the city council determines that an allegation warrants further review, the city attorney shall be solely responsible for conducting the review, directly or indirectly, and reporting back to the city council on the results of the review within 90 days. In carrying out its Section 2 review, the city attorney shall at minimum determine whether one or the following have occurred. The council member has pled guilty, pled no contest to, or has been convicted of a felony. The council member is found by the Fair Political Practices Commission to have violated the State Political Reform Act, or the council member has conceded to an allegation that they violated the act. An outside law enforcement agency finds or has found that a council member has engaged in a physical altercation with another council member or city staff, and that the council member instigated or escalated the altercation. An outside investigator retained by the city attorney finds or has found that a council member disclosed confidential information, whether provided in closed session or otherwise, for the purpose of influencing the outcome of a decision. An outside investigator retained by the city attorney finds or has found that a council member violated the city's sexual harassment policy. An outside investigator retained by the city attorney finds that the council member was under the influence of alcohol or drugs during a city council meeting. So from there, it lays out consequences. They're very clear. So if you have been found to have done one of these things, then you lose a spot in the rotation. So the penalty is your access to the mayorship is now, you have 1 year that you have to sit out. So if you have been found, and then, let's see. if a council member is serving as mayor, when this occurs, they immediately resign and they go back to the end of the rotation. And for every other instance, I believe it's another year back. So if you violated the sexual harassment policy and then did something else, it's another spot. Of course, the council can determine something else if they so choose. I think that all of these standards are standards that are so easy to agree to that if somebody was behaving in this manner, we would not want them to be the mayor. They're also factual things that you can point to and say, yes, absolutely. Someone's been convicted of a felony. They don't deserve to be the mayor. So they don't deserve to be on the council. But, right, it's very clear things. Instead of, I feel that this person is disrespecting me or they're mean to me, this allows that exit ramp while also respecting that the citizens have asked for a stronger, a strict rotation. I also feel that this protects future councils because it's very clear how you handle a situation like this, and the consequences are very clear. And it's fair and it's even. If somebody does something, their penalty is X. If another council member does something, their penalty is X. Their standing amongst the council, their friendships amongst the council don't come into play. So if somebody is beloved by the rest of the council, they might get 1 year, but if somebody is on bad terms with the rest of the council, they might get 3 or 4 years. This, I think, in the face of the community says we're following this and we can make it more public how somebody maybe has fallen from grace. You give the consequence and you move on. And I think that our community needs this. I think that we don't lose anything to have a strict rotation. And this is also a living document. So if there becomes something that's very obvious that needs to go in there, we can add that at that time.
Please, Colleen, and then I have some comments to make.
Okay. I'd like to thank the ad hoc committee for these draft procedures. I don't have a problem with anything in there. So it almost makes me wonder why this has to go on a ballot, but that's another discussion. But what I don't see is these are consequences, and I don't see the affirmations of objectives of what we want to do and how we want to operate. And I think that's needed. And that's what I saw with other cities where they say, this is the behavior we want. This is how we want to deal with the public. This is how we want to deal with our staff as an affirmation. So I don't have a problem with anything. And I'm very appreciative of the time. I know this had to be a lot of time to put it together, but, and I'd have no problem approving that. But I would still like to see us consider the endeavor of putting together some affirmations of how we want to operate and how we are responsible to our constituents.
Isn't that a workshop we've already agreed to attend to?
I believe that the best practices that was in a prior meeting is something that can be drawn upon for that. I don't think that it really it encompassed all of it, just as I don't think that these draft procedures for moving a mayor and moving council members in the rotational list is completely comprehensive. Do you want me to go ahead with that, or do you want to jump in? No, okay. In section 3 of these draft procedures, and I'm not sure if these were these drafted by the subcommittee or were these drafted by legal?
Combination of both, Madam Mayor.
Because I thought this didn't have time to go to a meeting of the subcommittee.
And then we attempted to put it into more legalese, but certainly the direction in terms of the items were product of the subcommittee, and they certainly reviewed them before we distributed them to the rest of the council.
So on section 3, and I appreciate that the city attorney would review this and be the divining factor in many of these things, or have an independent reviewer who's familiar with these kind of items be looking at it. In 3A, where it's been convicted, convictions can take several years. And so a conviction, I don't think, is where we want to be. Certainly, if you are convicted of a felony, that is an issue. But to wait on a conviction, that person, that could be years before a court issues a conviction on something. The same with the violating the Fair Political Reform Act. That is going to be something that their investigation can take many, many years, and can take a long time before anything is released or known about what may or may not have occurred. Item C, the physical altercation. There can also be verbal altercations that are just as bad as a physical altercation. And I think that needs to be taken into account. Item E, where they're violated the city's sexual harassment policy, it should not just be sexual harassment. It should be any harassment. Sexual harassment is not the only kind of unfair labor or unseemingly conduct that should be considered here. There's a lot of other conduct that is not just sexual. Those are just a couple of my little notes on this policy. And as far as putting this to a vote of the people, I think if we do it in a resolution, but we have to have a code of conduct policy that is agreeable in that, that we can reference, that we have also approved as a second living document, before I would say that we should put it to a resolution that would have more difficulty being changed by a future council. And I would not think that it needs to go a vote of the people. I think we can agree to this. We're all civilized.
Just a point of clarity, Terry, for the convicted of a felony, I think we could change that to the subject of a criminal investigation. And then we did talk about verbal altercations versus physical. And the worry there is, there could be a very heated phone call. There's no proof that that occurred. And it becomes a he said, she said situation. If there's an actual physical altercation, likely the police would be called and there would be a police report and an investigation into that. You might want to say, so if you wanted to include verbal stuff, then you could say that it occurred during a meeting. A public meeting. And describe, it would have to be very clear, because people have gotten very animated in meetings before. And so, it needs to be really clear when somebody has violated something versus, oh, that was a heated moment. Is it that they used profanity? Is it that they got up out of their seat? Like what standards, I think, whenever you put something in something like this, needs to be super clear. Yeah.
We all, Madam Mayor, if I may just interject, the concept here was not that these procedures or some variation of it would be going to the voters. The item before the council is whether or not an ordinance that would deal with how a mayor would be appointed is really what is the item that would go to the voters. There's a particular subsection within that ordinance that indicates that there's a removal process that would be adopted separately by the council that could be changed from time to time.
I understand that.
Okay.
And that the procedures for removing or how the consequences are weighed is something that does need to be a living document, because something that would be considered bad behavior 25 years ago is not is normal now. It's normalized.
Or reverse.
Or reverse. You know, things people could get away saying in a public meeting, except when you get too high in the office, wouldn't be tolerated now, where it was normal back in the day. So I think that it needs to be a living document, but I would want a document that, to begin with, I could live with before I put it on anything that went to the voters. Even if it's just referencing that document. But I would say that we could pass it as best practices, or however you want to do it, that wouldn't need to go to the voters and wouldn't need to spend $29,000 and just make it happen. So again, Karen, you want to?
I would just point out, I don't know if the public knows this, but as council members, we are required by law, we have to go through ethics courses, and we also go through anti-harassment. And to me, when we talk about this one section E, it kind of covers all of that, because that could be everything from harassment to extortion to threatening someone. It's all encompassed under, so I think we could reference the ethics and anti-harassment if we violated any of the tenets of that training, because that's a state policy.
And a lot of these have outside investigator purposefully, so that it's not like, well, you did this to me. No, I didn't. If there's an outside investigator, they can make a determination. The other thing too is that there's two things we're looking at here. It's the code of conduct that would come into play if you're removing somebody in the rotation. And then there's best practices and some of the things that you were talking about, like we strive to do X, Y, and Z, or the way that we interact with applicants, for example. To me, those are things that are on best practices that we sign, but a violation of one of those things, because they're more subjective, is not tied to.
And it might need to be.
Is not. Well, then you can argue you're just in the same loop.
If I may, best practices gives me a connotation of that it's optional. I like guidelines. I saw a lot of cities use the term guidelines, and it doesn't have to be guidelines. Maybe there's another term, but best practices is kind of like, here you go. I just like it a little bit more where it really expresses an affirmation a little more strongly, just by the title.
But do you have an example of what that, like, do you have something that
I have a stack about this high at home that I downloaded of all the peninsula cities and some beyond and what they have. And I haven't had the time. I've read through a bunch. I could bring it back and give you excerpts. Some of them are really interesting, what they came up with. We don't need to reinvent the wheel.
We went through a bunch. It's just a lot of them aren't provable. Like, a lot of them are aspirational. Treating someone with respect is like very subjective. And so if you're going to use that to remove somebody from the rotation, it becomes like.
But that's your procedures for removing, not the guidelines that are more aspirational.
Right. So you agree that there could be two separate
Oh, yes,
things?
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But there could be certainly more things on this and it could be narrowed down or broadened in quite a few ways. I think this is a much better first draft than we saw before. And one of the things I thought about is that I know in a lot of our union contracts, police, fire, those type of things, they have some language that is probably very broad, but also very specific, that is legally enforcing when someone's doing something inappropriate, and how they address that and how they address chastising or doing something of that nature. So I think that, any of our procedures for removing need to be based in California state employment law because we are all employees. You know, when you get down to it, really underpaid ones, but employees nonetheless. And so, you know, we have to be able to fit them in within the guidelines of what state law would allow for employees also. And I think that's something that, you know, is a little more nuanced than what might be on our initial list of what is, you know, items that are no-nos. Karen?
So this is the first time we've seen this draft.
Yes.
So from my perspective, I want input as well. This came from a subcommittee. It needs to go into discussion with all of us. It's not going to happen tonight. We're not going to nuance all of these documents. I stick by what I said earlier, and I think we need to maybe have a public workshop on this. I don't know, but it's a good first draft, but that's what it is to me. It is just a first draft.
Madam Mayor, we have a hands raised from
Cliff.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Cliff.
I'm not hearing you.
Councilmember Lentz has his hands raised.
Okay. Hi, Cliff. Please go ahead.
No, thank you, Terry. Yeah, no, great discussion. You know, I'd like to ask a question of Michael. Maybe this might be able to help us to get over the finish line and satisfy everyone to a certain degree. And so, Michael, when we had our last subcommittee meeting, we talked about the idea of having the ballot measure go before the people, but that we could have language in the ballot measure that that implementation of the rotation was based on the council's code of conduct being not violated. If we had language like that, so that you don't have to put, you know, all these things or things that you might think of, you know, a week from now or 6 months from now, that, you know, one of the things that Terry had mentioned was wanting the document to be a living document, and so that we could have a potential workshop that then adds to, modifies the code of conduct, but it always stays in circulation and is used as a guideline in regards to the rotation. So would that be acceptable to put before the voters?
Well, council certainly has discretion in terms of what it wants to put before the voters. The way it was set up from the direction that the subcommittee gave to staff was primarily to set up the appointment procedure, and that's primarily what the ordinance that would be on the ballot addresses. But there would be a sort of a final subsection to that ordinance that would provide that there could be removal of the mayor or moving a council member down on the rotation list based on some procedure that the council would agree upon, so that wouldn't be embodied in the matter going to the voters. The only thing really going to the voters would be the appointment process that is more definitive than the council's current guidelines. The code of conduct or the removal process or the aspirational things that the council certainly discussed would be sort of a separate document that the council would agree upon and adopt through resolution or whatever, but would not be something that would be going to the voters per se, unless the council wanted to do it that way. But of course, that would make it very difficult to change as time goes on.
Got it. Okay, so just so that I have clarity, Michael. So if the ordinance went before the voters, and in the language it talked about the code of conduct, not in the detail, but that the rotation could have the rotation could be altered based upon the criteria found in the code of conduct. And that if we move something forward, before August 9th, but we haven't, as a council, fully fleshed out what that code of conduct eventually would be, it could pass by the voters, and then we could still be working on it next year, or say we worked on it, this fall, or we work on it a year from now. Because it's a living document, it gives the council flexibility, even though it's voted on by the people. But there's that caveat in the ordinance that ties to the code of conduct. So I'm just, if you could provide clarity, I know it sounds complicated, but it's really trying to find that acceptance by you or legal that we could move something forward. The people are voting on the rotation, the firm rotation, but it allows the council with an exit ramp if one of the council members violates one of the items in the code of conduct that hasn't at this time been officially adopted by the council.
Well, again, the ordinance really addresses primarily how the appointment process would work and the rotational list. And as I'm indicated, there's a final subsection that says essentially nothing in everything that we've said before in terms of the appointment process precludes or prevents the city council from removing a person as mayor or moving the position on the mayoral list down if the council has adopted procedures for doing that. In other words, a code of conduct that would describe the grounds, timing, and consequences of how a person could be removed as mayor or moved down on the rotational list. It's sort of it carves out that from the ordinance.
Carves it out.
Right.
Got it. And so the council could adopt the code of conduct, say in October, if it wanted to. And then the council could amend the code of conduct in January if it felt, that it was necessary to add other items to the code of conduct. Like maybe we, eventually have our workshop and it's in the springtime. That's okay, correct?
Correct. I mean, that's what this provision would allow the council to have a working document in terms of what the code of conduct would be, either or both aspirational and also consequences for unacceptable behavior as determined by the council.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. And I know it says in the staff report, and just to reiterate, that if it did go before the public, and of course there's no guarantee that the public's going to vote in favor of it. They might say, no, I'm not interested in this type of firm rotation. But if the public was inclined and they did vote in favor, then the rotation part would be what would be the law of the land, not the code of conduct, which is at the purview of the council to modify as it sees fit.
That's correct.
All right. Thank you very much. That's it, Terry.
Thank you. Colleen?
I'm taking all of this in, and I look back at the ordinance that is in effect right now, and it is more or less a firm rotation, subject to it can be changed by the council. I'm not suggesting that we not change that, but my quest in life for simplicity is, why do we need to take it to the voters if we all agree to a firm rotation on the council? All we need to do is draw up, we already have a suggestion with some guidelines here about how the rotation works and draft procedures for removing a mayor. What we're lacking is a code of conduct. Why can't we have a new ad hoc put together that? Bring it back for a special council meeting and have another public hearing. Public can weigh in. And if the council all agrees, we save $27,000 and everybody's happy. Why do we need to make this more complex?
I agree with you.
Honestly, because if we're all agreeing, I don't see the problem. We would be, again, we would be taking what we have, which is kind of a firm rotation, and we would be memorializing it with more stringent language that's been proposed, along with these draft procedures. Addition from another ad hoc bringing forward some code of conduct guidelines, and we could vote on it. Public could give us their input. It would be published in advance.
And I have already offered to not take up my position as the mayor for next year and forward that to Councilmember Lentz. This should be something we can just do and be done with it. Because this was what the public or the 41 and 22 people wanted in the beginning.
Well, I think the reason, with all due respect, is because we have a rotation, whether you want to call it firm right now or not. It's very easy to not follow. And so I think that the ask is that if it's voted on, then there's not really any wiggle room to just say, yeah, we don't really want to follow that thing.
But if we all vote on it, and it has all those essential components, isn't that the same thing?
No.
It's not the same thing that it's written into memorial. It's not memorialized that this is exactly how it's going to be from here till doomsday. And that's what it would be if we send it to the voters. It's this way till doomsday.
Well, but again, the code can change. The code of conduct can change.
The code of conduct can change, but if we send it to the voters now for November, there is no procedures for removing the mayor that I'm happy with. I think these are lacking. And if we send it there, somebody, whoever's mayor, could violate any of these things. They're not in place. We could not remove them. And we've had that happen before. Let's just put it out there.
Here's an
Had
ask.
it happen before.
Here's an ask. If there's not an appetite to put it forth to the voters because you feel like there's a rush timeline, okay. Could this council make a commitment to really work on this item and really come up with a code of conduct that you feel comfortable with?
That's what we've been talking about.
Hold on.
That's what we've been talking about.
Prior to the next rotation. If you're really serious about having something and having a code of conduct that satisfies what you want to see, let's really make it a priority and ensure that we get that done before the next rotation. And then we could take that and memorialize that later on in the 2026 if we so chose. But I think that I'm concerned that it's going to be a kick the can down the road type of thing. We'll get to it at some point. But there's a great starting point here. And I think that we can accomplish this before the end of the year.
With everything else that's going on, I highly doubt it, but if we can sure give it a shot. I mean, you're going to be taking some time off. We're out for the next month. We've got quite a bit of stuff coming up towards the end of the year. But, if we can come up with something that works and can pass through legal, and we can do it as a code of conduct and a procedures for removal, I think that's great. And it's just going to take a lot of work, and I can't guarantee that. Well, I'm not on that subcommittee personally, so it really is going to depend on, what we see coming from the subcommittee, and or if we set up a separate one.
Well, what it will take is a workshop. What it'll take is a workshop, because I can't read your minds, and you've said you're not. Each of you has said you're not comfortable. So this was an attempt to try to address maybe some of those things.
And it did a good job.
We need to have a workshop, I think, and give that feedback. and then come to a place where it seems like we have all the points, and then legal can draw it up and have it really reflect what.
Can we do a workshop in October?
Probably.
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
I would like to state for the record that personally, because we're not going to call a vote tonight, we're not prepared to call a vote tonight because there is no official language for it to be put on the ballot. And it doesn't sound like this council has an appetite to add another meeting before August 9th, which I respect. For me personally, stating for the record, I would have loved to see this go to the voters in November. I believe in this rotation, and I think that having a code of conduct is fantastic. I think that we could continue working on that, even while it's up for election in November. Having that deadline would ensure that that would get done. But it doesn't look like that's what's going to happen. But I think it's important for the public to know that I would have liked to see it go to a vote.
And I have no problem with it going as long as we have the backup documentations for it.
Madam Mayor, if I may, if it will accelerate the procedure, since I have this download of documents this thick, could we have an ad hoc committee to do a code of conduct? And I would be willing to work on that if someone else would work with me.
So a new ad hoc? Is that
Just to
you're
deal
suggesting?
with the code of conduct and come up with some ideas, so when we have a workshop, there's something that everyone else could have already looked at and commented, and we'd have something to discuss rather than just out of thin air. Because there's a lot there that's already been implemented elsewhere, and we could kind of pick and choose and then talk about it and just come up with, here's a list of possibilities. Not just say, this is it, but here's a whole list of possibilities, is what I'm suggesting.
Right now, we have Madison and Cliff was on election issues. The code of conduct is not necessarily part of election issues.
Well, it's best practices is a separate committee, which is what we put forward.
Who's best practices?
Cliff and I's best practices, and
Oh,
then there's
also.
another,
Okay.
which I feel like that would fall under best practices, because we already worked on outlining how a council member should interact, like with an applicant or developer, for example. So I feel like that kind of stuff falls under.
I have no
That
objection. I was just concerned because you were both talking about not having time to do it. So I was offering my time to do it.
No, I don't think Cliff said anything about not having time.
Oh, no,
I
no, it was
inferred-
discussion between you two.
I inferred that Madison might not have
Right.
time to make a promise that we could get it done by
Right.
election day.
I get that.
I mean, I just inferred that, and that's not my place to infer. So, I mean, I think if they can, I think that the any council member who wants to submit some stuff that they think should be included should be able to do it to the subcommittee and then have it presented at the workshop.
I'd be happy to forward what I have.
Okay.
Okay, rather than remake everything, restir the pot.
Can we get a 5-minute break?
Yes, does staff have direction on this?
I think we do. I'll repeat back what I've heard is the council's directing staff to prepare a workshop in October for this conversation to happen, and also understand that council members are should they choose to contribute some ideas, as Colleen is going to be doing, that they can do that to the subcommittee.
Okay, great. I think that is what we wanted to see happen. That's the wording that I expected. So thank you. With that, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back shortly. Lunch with us?
It's like next time I'm not going to save someone's life. I'm just gonna, if I have to be at another.
Why are you staying? You don't have to be here.
You don't offend us.
Great. I'd like to reconvene the city council meeting, and with, in the interest of time and everyone's sleep, I'm going to ask the council to remove items N, O, and P and continue them to another meeting. Can I get a motion to amend the agenda?
I will make that motion.
Hey, Karen, excuse me, Carrie, I wanted to make a comment at the end of our last item, but you took the break. So before you move forward, if I could just
Can we
just a couple
do
of
this
things.
item so that our members of the public can go home, that we're here for those items, and then we'll come back for your statement?
Well, it's associated with something else.
We could ask them to stay we could ask them to stay for a minute after we make this one motion. It'll take just 5 seconds.
Okay, yeah, sure. All right.
I've made the motion.
A motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor. Roll call.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. And thank you. And for a matter of public record, Councilmember Lentz got cut off by me after the last item, and he has still some comments to make.
Oh, thank you, Terry. And you didn't cut me off. It was just, we just adjourned for a break. So, I just want to thank the members of the public who, put forth their thoughts and their perspectives to us. I really appreciate that. As public servants, we're supposed to take in that feedback and then use it to gather research. And I feel as a member of the subcommittee, we did that. We honored what people had put forth for us to look into. And, even though the items are not going before the voters, we did get it to a particular spot in our conversation as a whole. The intent was to make our council better, to be more accountable to the public. And I think all of us can be proud of that, even though the vote didn't happen, or the direction to have the vote occur for these two items. I think addressing them is important, and I hope that eventually someday we do have these things as the law of the land, because I think that it's not just about our council, it's about the future councils and putting forth good guidelines that are fair and equitable and everyone can get behind. So thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we are going to move on to item I, adoption of the urgency ordinance for the Brisbane Municipal Code section concerning electrical vehicle infrastructure. Staff report, brief staff report, please. I just had it pulled because I had a couple questions on language.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. Sustainability Manager Adrienne Etherton. I want to briefly thank my colleague Jeremiah Robbins from the Planning Department and our consultant support from Peninsula Clean Energy and TRC. I know I have Taylor from TRC who has been hanging on Zoom for this meeting in case your questions get too technical for me to answer. This ordinance is essentially 3 parts. The first part is to repeal the existing all-electric ordinance that we have on the books that is no longer enforceable due to the Ninth Circuit Court's ruling in Berkeley v. California Restaurant Association. The second part is essentially to backfill that repeal with a building energy performance reach code. This is going back to the way we used to do reach codes in the past, where we just said all buildings have to meet a higher performance standard, being more energy efficient. To be clear, that does mean that natural gas is allowed in buildings now, but it also requires that if buildings are built with gas, that they have pre-wiring for electric readiness. And the third piece is an amendment of the electric vehicle infrastructure requirements to meet or exceed the new state intervening code. So on July 1st, a new piece of state code went into effect, and it kind of overlapped with our existing REACH code on the books, and we didn't want it to be in conflict or confusing for applicants. Happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. And I'm going to kick it off just because I asked for this to be pulled, because on page 69 or 3 of 31 of your report, there's a chart in the center of the page that talks about new multifamily dwellings and a minimum of 1 level 2 EV-ready circuit parking per space or unit, 50% of guest parking at EV, and overall minimum 40% parking EV. And with SB 9, it's my understanding that in many new dwellings, we cannot require parking at all. So how are we requiring 1 EV space if we can't force 1 parking space?
Certainly. So we do have an exception, and I apologize that wasn't in that staff report summary right there. We do have an exception that's 15.84.070B, Part 4 exceptions, A, where less than 1 parking space per unit is required as provided in Chapter 17.34. The Level 2 EV-ready circuit parking space requirements shall apply only to the parking required as provided in Chapter 17.34. This subparagraph does not alter the required minimum number of parking spaces as provided. So basically, if you have 1 parking space, it has to be EV. And if you are not required to have any parking spaces, there is no EV requirement.
So if that is the case, and someone in that building with 1 parking place has a car that's not EV, they cannot park.
That is not necessarily the case. It is 1 parking space per unit or per single-family resident, per household. So it would be, in a residential situation, it would be up to the owner. If they do not have an EV and they have 1 parking space, they could surely park their car there.
But they would still have to spend the money.
Multifamily, that's not the case, and this is talking about multifamily.
So
and I'm looking at the cheat sheet. I'm not looking into the .714-945.
So there are some differences when there are parking spaces that are assigned to individual units and when there are parking spaces that are unassigned. I think you were probably, if you were in a situation where you did not have parking spaces that are assigned to each unit, you would have more unassigned parking, and there would be a certain percentage of that parking that would be required. I might defer to my planning colleagues to confirm that I have that assumption correct.
It's just, and on a secondary note, right now, and I understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to be EV ready, and I think that's great. But we come into the parking lot here, and there is no parking but EV parking, and the rest of the spaces are full, and there is no place to park. And maybe we're an anomaly because most people don't have to come very far, and so they may not have to charge when they come here. But we have no parking because we're too EV ready.
Right. I see that Ingrid, it looks like, has stepped away. I was going to ask her to maybe pull up a couple of slides on some of the specifics here. In a multifamily situation, if you are living in the complex and have a car and have a parking space, whether that's assigned or unassigned, you would still have a place to park. This is not No one is requiring that the owners of the units say that if there is an EV charging there, that you have to be an EV to be parked in that space. There is no law that requires that. It is up to the individual owner of the property to determine if an EV charger is exclusively for EV use or not. That is actually something that we weighed when we put the chargers in here.
But you could get ticketed here, though.
But the owner of the property would be able to determine whether that was going to be something they were going to enforce or
say
not.
at the Brisbane Village, where there's two not working EV chargers, they could say that you don't have to be an EV to park in their EV charging place.
Well, we own that charger, so I think we would be the ones making the determination in that case. And as it is not working, we have signed that at this point in time, anyone can park in those spaces. But otherwise, yes, I think that is up to us to determine. We understand that in some cases, these requirements are getting a little bit ahead of EV adoption. The goal is to have the spaces in when it is least costly to install them, which is at the initial point of construction, putting in that conduit and everything, and have them be available for that future use that we expect is coming.
Okay. That's my only questions, and I'm sorry, Colleen.
I'll be quick. Adrian, under, again, page 3 of 5 or 69, under new multifamily dwellings, and maybe you've kind of covered this, the one that jumped out at me was the minimum 50% guest parking spaces. I'm not against having that ready. Is EVCS, I don't understand that designation. Is that ready or is that an actual charger?
EVCS is an actual charger.
Okay, so my own.
And actually, Ingrid, could you go to the next slide? I think it is.
So my only concern with that was where we have people that are doing housing and affordable housing, and the costs are
what we've got.
making some things prohibitive right now. To have 50% of guest parking spaces, is this the time to do that? Because I just, if I went to visit someone, I would not expect to be able to charge my car there. I would just be going, okay, they must have a charging station somewhere in town. And if it enabled a contractor to pencil out the dollars to make it work, I'd rather, even if that got reduced to 25%. And then maybe through time, when there's more EV vehicles, maybe we should increase it. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just asking the question, because
I hear your question. I did want to pull this up. I pulled this together this afternoon so that you had a more direct comparison of the proposed requirements with what we currently have on the books and what that state EV code is. So that 50% guest parking spaces, EVCS, is actually something that we have already had in place in Brisbane as part of our EV reach code since at least 2022.
And it's not been an issue then?
It has not, as far as I am aware. I'm getting no's from the planning department as well. And we do have provisions in the code that say if there is an issue with electrical capacity that makes a development infeasible because of these requirements, that they can be reduced so that they,
that's perfect.
Just put in whatever is the maximum feasible.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yep. If it says EVCS, that means.
You want him to come up?
You're not on the record if you're talking from your seat, so if you'd like to come up, we can direct it on the record.
As an owner of 8 electric cars for 25 years, the requirement is for conduiting and not the copper wiring, because that's where the expense really comes in. If you didn't put in the copper pipe, the copper conduit, strike that. The conduit should only be the requirement.
So it varies. Where you see EVCS, that means that the charger itself is required to be installed. If you see something that says EV ready, that means there is conduit.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Any other comments or questions from
No.
us? Cliff? No? Okay. So now we'll go to public comments. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment on this? Seeing none, do we have anyone online that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on. Can I get a first and a second to adopt an order of urgency ordinance amending the Brisbane Municipal Code?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz?
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin?
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Okay, item J. Again, I asked this one to be pulled. Authorize the city manager to solicit proposal and negotiate a sole source contract from Good City for 70 Old County Road Community Engagement and Planning Project. Brief staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Early in May, you may recall the discussion about a planning effort centered on the old B of A site at 70 Old County Road. There's some question about the scope and how broad any planning effort should be. The council direction at that point was to ensure that and focus on 70 Old County as a standalone development, and then look forward or potentially looking at the adjacent shopping center site for compatibility and consistency, and maybe create some vision for that. So that was kind of the overall direction, really to focus on the 70 Old County site. We went ahead and took the preliminary scope of work to the Economic Development Subcommittee later in May and had a discussion. That report is attached to your staff report, as was the preliminary scope of work. And some of the key takeaways from that were staff was recommending we go ahead and with a sole source contract instead of putting this out for a formal bid. And with Good City, there's a firm that is doing a lot of work in Brisbane currently. They're very familiar with our processes, with our community. So our preference was to negotiate a contract with them exclusively. That contract would come back to the council in the fall for formal execution. So you would see the final scope and the final budget at that point in time. As a reminder, there was a placeholder budget in our community development budget from last year, or this year actually, for $150,000 for this planning effort. So our assumption is that will be sufficient for the scope and scale. But again, the council will see that final scope, scale, and budget if we can proceed along the path as requested.
Thank you. So my initial reason to pull this was on page 102 or 2 of 3. When you go down to number 2, bullet points D, E, and F. Where we were updating the Parkside plan as needed. And I think that I understand that when we discussed this prior, that there was a discussion about Parkside and whether Parkside was still relevant or irrelevant or needed to be updated. And I didn't think we were really giving the direction to overhaul it. And I just have concerns that we're biting off such a big portion that we're not going to be able to see what possibilities B of A site has standalone. Mm-hmm. And that when it was looking at the scope of work to obtain project level CEQA, including Parkside, that sort of made me feel that we've gone a little step beyond what direction the council had given for this project. And I just hate to see the same debacle that we had when we tried to do a Crocker revisioning and everybody's jaw hit the table when we saw what that group of consultants came back with. So that was my reason initially to pull it, because I understand this is going out for a bid, but I would hate to see too much put into this bid where we're going beyond the scope of what the council wanted. And I'm happy to get the input of the Economic Development Committee that was on this. But if we're actually looking at the housing portion, which is listed here as Parkside as being part of it, then I think it should be involving the housing and, other subcommittees somehow, where we're not just looking at economic development when we're looking at Parkside involvement.
If I could just maybe clarify the Parkside piece of this, is currently there's a schematic or a conceptual vision for Parkside, or for the shopping center site and B of A in the Parkside plan currently. It's not regulatory. It was more of a vision. So the thought was that whatever came out of this independent planning process for 70 Old County, you wouldn't want Parkside showing one thing and then having the city having had a separate plan for 70 Old County that's different. So the idea is to fold whatever comes out of this process into the Parkside document, not to reopen Parkside overall. It's just to make sure you don't have an inconsistent, I look at one plan and it shows one thing for the site, and then the city's adopted or has a scheme for something else on the site. So it's more a matter of consistency and format, we're not intending on looking at the greater Parkside. That direction was very clear from the council meeting in
So
May.
item F, the obtaining project level CEQA, is not something that,
Well, you could call it whatever the project is that the city wants to move forward with, what's going to obtain the CEQA clearance. Whether it's housed in Parkside or whether you want to call it a design plan for 70 Old County, whatever it ends up being, there's going to be some need to have some environmental review of that plan.
okay, okay. That gives me a little more clarity of what we were talking about in the quick review documents, and I appreciate that. Again, any questions from others or from the Economic Development Committee or anything? Those were my only questions and concerns.
No, I'm good.
So, if there's any questions in regards to moving forward, I guess Karen and I could answer any questions. But I think John was pretty clear on what the intent is. It's just to use existing information to help the process. The focus is as a standalone, but we also didn't want to, clap with one hand. If the information has been collected from previous public engagements, and it might make sense to to include that information as an option, as an alternative to the full council. So hopefully what's in the staff report works for the majority of the council to move forward. Is there anything else, Karen, that maybe you wanted to add?
No, I just think that having another vision from a consultant is going to give us possibly some new ideas. I think that was when my head was at. It's like, I know what I'm thinking these sites should be, and in my head I'm playing that dance. But I think a consultant's coming in with a completely different, clean slate thought process and might really just come up with something that blows us all away. That was kind of where I was at with that.
I'm good with moving forward as long as it's B of A and shopping center, and that's it.
That is it, absolutely. And Madison, we might find as we're looking at a standalone that in order for it to be feasible, and that's part of the evaluation, we want it, whatever we put forth is got to pencil out, and maybe what
what can happen, penciling out might not be in the direction of that the council wants to do. But of course, we own this property, and we're paying interest and principal on it, and us, having some kind of process to engage the public to put forth something that can work. And I agree with you. It should expand beyond the area around the shopping center. I know that I think in the staff report, excuse me if I'm not, if I'm including something that's not in there, but I think there's also just discussion in regards to the vacant property that's next to the shopping center as well, since it's connected and it's not touched.
Thank you, Cliff. I have a question. Isn't Good City normally mostly involved in housing projects?
No, they do a full suite of environmental planning, design work. So they are a pretty full service firm.
Okay, I just was wondering, and I'm glad to hear that you are bringing it back for full council review before the contract's signed. I was under the impression somewhere that I'd read that it was authorizing to go ahead without council review of the projects for parameters. I'm going to open it up unless somebody wants to make another question to the public. Is there any members of the public who'd like to comment on the proposal? Please come forward.
I'll make this brief since the hour is late. I'd just like us to make very sure that we do not make the same communication errors we made with the consultant work that was done at the Marina. And also a reminder that for the public, especially, we don't own the Village Shopping Center. We don't own the California Teachers Association property. We do not own any of the Parkside property. And so to envision that plan when we don't have alignment, agreement, or ownership of that is really challenging. So I hope we really stay on target with the Bank of America property, 70. And also we look at the environmental issues because it is a low-lying area that used to be water. And also in the interim, when we're making, all of this kind of, it's going to be a while before anything really gets developed or built there. I would hope that we could open the parking lot for, shall I say, additional parking or overflow parking for the community park. We've had several events lately that have exceeded the capacity, greatly exceeded the capacity of parking in the area, and people have dangerously parked on the curve, both sides of the curve, even where it says no parking, and it has created a very precarious situation for people coming in and out of town. And so I think that we should use that in the meanwhile, for additional parking and really crack down on parking along Old County Road, and or limit the amount of people that are coming for a reservation, like a wedding or something, because it really has been a real stressor in that area. So that's my short-term recommendation, and long-term recommendation is really focus, make sure that not only our excellent staff know what your vision is, but that the consultant truly understands that we're not redoing the Parkside plan. That would be a waste of money at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on this? Do we have anyone online? Without, I'll close the public hearing. Can I get a vote to move ahead with this, or a motion?
So moved.
Motion and a
Second.
second. Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
Councilmember Lenz.
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Thank you. And we move to item K, which is authorize the city manager to sign the construction agreement for Alvarado to San Benito Stairway Project. And Councilmember Cunningham asked for this to be removed.
Okay,
From consent.
yes, so Councilmember Davis and I are on the Public Art Subcommittee, and part of our conversation about identifying places where we would like to have public art in this town were our stairways and staircases around town, and particularly we targeted this one because we knew it was going to be up for renovation very, very soon.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit surprised that it didn't come back to us relative to the Public Art Committee being involved in either the design of the staircase. I mean, they had some amazing ideas when we were in the Public Art Committee from the members of the Public Art Committee about lighting or tiling or mosaics, all
Railings.
kinds of beautiful railings. So we do want to be part of this process.
Yeah.
And I'm a little disappointed that we weren't. And when I saw it, I'm like, oh, we've got to hopefully fix that. Karen, this one's yours.
And how would staff work with the art committee to make sure that the infrastructure that you're going ahead with, which is funded by grants and a small matching, was conducive to being able to have some of the art implemented alongside so that you're not redoing the
So-
costs of things?
So I think that the Public Art Committee is willing to apply additional funds. So, we don't want to, it's so much easier to implement creative lighting from the get-go. It's so much easier to implement creative railings or to do mosaics like at the beginning of the process. This is why this staircase in particular is the best one to work on, because we're building it, from scratch. So
It's going to be so well used.
So I think that the committee is like looking for a collaboration with Public Works to see where like areas of opportunity. Of course, Public Works needs to make sure that something's safe and that, it's functional. But I think there's a way to do that with also incorporating artistic elements. So we're hoping that maybe we could have that collaboration on the design of some aspects of the stairway.
And use some of the funds from Public Art to contribute to this project.
Yeah, that's all great. I was operating from the perspective that our assistant transportation engineer, Justin Ewan, attended the Public Art Committee when we were working on the conceptual design for this stairway.
Yes.
And what I understood from that communication was that there was interest in perhaps mosaics on the face of the steps and sculptures along the way. And I did not recall that there were comments about handrails or lighting and those being artistically, focused. And those two things, sculptures and mosaics, we investigated could easily be added after. So that was the perspective that Public Works was operating from, that those two things that there was an interest in could be added afterwards and didn't.
I think this has come about because we just got a consultant and they've showed us examples of utilitarian things that also incorporate public art. And so we've seen like a lot of lighting.
Beauty and function.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of like park lighting, for example, that is more artistic. And so I think it's kind of broadened the committee's vision of how we could apply some money and, enhance some of these spaces. Mosaics also are so incredibly expensive. Depending on how many stairs there are, we haven't priced it out, but I know that it's very costly. So I think that the committee probably would like to have some options. Maybe lighting might be, something cheaper, but also has a great effect. So is
The
there
surprise art idea?
Yeah, is Public Works kind of open to, I'm not to put you on the spot, but
I want to put her on the spot.
But is there can we continue the conversation and maybe some other aspects that might be on more the ground level?
Can I interrupt for just one moment? Can I get a motion to continue the meeting to 11 p.m.?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt
No,
your
no, it's all
thought.
good.
You know, looking at this, it's as far a cry from artistic with the prefabricated steel stair section, bollard lighting, and, you know, plain old guardrails and handrails. So how can we give you the go-ahead to work in conjunction with public art and still move forward? Is that something we can get direction on how we would want to word that? Or because we don't want to just go out for a bid with plain olds?
Yeah, and of course, the Public Works Department is open to that. We used the bollard standard that we've used on other stairways and that meets the dark sky compliant ordinance, and we use the handrail that we've typically used, and these things are, yes, they're utilitarian. I'm an engineer. We're trying to do it within the budget. That's what we came up with. And I didn't realize there was interest in the lighting and the handrail when we did the design. So, of course, we're open to that. We're ready to put it out to bid and build this fall. So if we're going to have a process, we may need to build it next spring instead.
Okay.
Is that something that the public art
We should meet on
committee
it.
would be able to work on, you know, this fall so that it could be ready to go to bid on, and that wouldn't interfere with any of our funding grants if we were to go to construction in the spring instead of the fall?
I can't tell you that for sure. I believe so, but I would really want to check before I said.
Well, part of that was a bike ped grant, right?
Yes.
And just for the public's edification, that application for that money through CCAG's bike ped committee took years.
We applied
to get.
3 times. That was our
Three
Three's a
times.
charm.
17, 19,
grant.
and 21.
Yep.
So we've already had the money for 3 years,
Yep.
it looks like, so.
I finally got the money, but
The
yeah, we've been hanging
contract
on to it.
was late 2022, so we're at about 2 years.
Anyway, so I'm looking for comments from both the public art and from
Staff.
Public Works, whether, and
We can do
perhaps
it.
the city manager, how we can move forward with this in a way that incorporates the Public Art Committee and Public Works and that can still move forward. How would you want that phrased? After I get public comment, of course.
Well, this is a little off the cuff, if I can. My initial suggestion is for us, instead of trying to develop it at this hour, that we can have a conversation offline with staff and come back. I don't think a delay of, would that be an issue? We're having a conversation.
Yeah, again, I believe that, we have a few grants going, so I want to be sure, but I believe that we have to complete this by next summer.
Next summer?
So we have a meeting coming up, and I'm sure this
Yeah.
can get agendized for
Yeah,
that to start talking about it.
I think an appropriate next step would be to bring this to the Public Art Committee and have a representative from the Public Works Department present so they can speak to any opportunities and constraints on the site, but also then provide some clarification regarding the timeline from their end in terms of construction and how it's tied to grant funding, and that would give us some parameters in moving forward with the Public Art Committee to draft kind of a project proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up for public comment if there's any members of the public here that would like to speak on this item.
I live a few doors down from that spot. I love that spot. I mean, because I take the shortcut down to Manor House, the store. I'm hoping the stairs don't get delayed too much longer. Just a basic staircase, the heck with the railing, or put it in so railing can be put in later. But I want a staircase as soon as possible. My opinion.
I understand that, but we can't put in stairs without hand railings.
Okay, then if
We
it
don't wanna
takes,
pay
but if it
for
adds a
something
few
twice.
years to do the art thing, then put the railings
No, it
in
won't.
and.
It won't.
No way.
We're not supposed to have a back and forth.
You want a
though.
Michelangelo staircase? Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who'd like to speak and or online that would like to speak? We have no one online. I'll go ahead and close the public comment. And then we are going to move on to say that we are going to move on to this can we put this on the next meeting?
Item L?
Hmm?
Item L?
Item K.
Oh, the next meeting.
Yeah, the next regularly scheduled public art meeting is July 29th.
Oh, great. So we'll have it for you in September.
July 29th. Okay, so this will be after our break. It'll come back to us.
Yes,
Unless we find some emergency reason it has to move forward before then.
correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And now we are going to move on to item L. City of Brisbane Local Stormwater Program Fees. I think that's Karen again.
Yes, it is, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. This is the annually occurring process to assess NPDES fees to properties based on their size and how they are developed. Really, nothing has changed from last year. This is separate from the commercial fees that you considered last month, and this generates $50,000 to $52,000 in revenue to spend on NPDES programs. And there's a process you need to follow to have a public hearing.
Great, thank you. Are there any council questions?
I have none.
Okay, I would like to open the public hearing. Is there a member of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no hands, is there anyone online? No, there is not. So can
Make a
I get a
motion.
first and a second to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. So we will consider adoption of a resolution of the City Council of the City of Brisbane imposing charges for funding the local Brisbane Stormwater Program, authorizing placement of said charges on the 24-25 county tax roll, and authorize the county tax collector to collect such charges. Is there any council discussion?
I have nothing.
Seeing none, can I get a first and a second to adopt a resolution imposing charges for funding the local Brisbane Stormwater Program, authorizing placement of said charges on the 24-25 county tax roll, and authorize the county tax collector to collect such charges?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Thank you very much. That moves us to item M, Sierra Point Landscaping and Lighting District. And we will first hear a statement of engineer of record, read the mayor's statement, hear city clerk's statement, open the public hearing to hear any testimony, and close the public hearing. So the engineer of record, and I guess it's me. I will now read the mayor's opening statement. Opening statement by the mayor of the City of Brisbane, July 18th, 2024, Sierra Point Landscaping and Lighting District. This is the time and place set for hearing on the engineer's report and the levy and collection of the proposed assessment for fiscal year 24-25 for the Sierra Point Landscaping and Lighting District. These proceedings were undertaken pursuant to the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. The engineer's report prepared by the engineer of work consists of the proposed improvements, the boundaries of the assessment district, any zones therein, the program diagram, the estimate of costs thereof, and the proposed assessments upon assessable lots and parcels of land within the district. Any one of these items may be the subject of protests or endorsements. You are asked to clearly identify yourself and the property owned by you so that your statement may be correctly recorded. The hearing is declared open, and I will ask the city clerk to report on the various notices given in connection to the hearing. City clerk statement.
Notices have been mailed and posted as required by the Landscaping and Lighting Act of 1972. Proofs of mailing and posting are on file in my office. A copy of the engineer's report prepared by the engineer of work was filed in my office on May 28, 2024, and has been open to public inspection since that time.
Thank you. Is there a member of the public wishing to make public comment on this public hearing item?
Am I allowed to? I'm not a property owner.
You are a property owner.
Oh, yeah, City of Brisbane. I feel like we have a lot of issues at the marina, and I feel like we really need to work on taking better care of the landscaping. There was a lot of water that didn't get used, causing the death of a lot of trees in the last couple of years due to drought conditions that were lifted, but not the from what I understand, the irrigation wasn't turned back on. And we lost a lot of trees. And it's looking pretty sad and really dry. And I think we shouldn't be so stingy with the water, and that we should take a little bit better care of the marina. We have a lot of ongoing issues there with landscaping, subsidence, salt intrusion, probably cap issues. So I know this is ministerial, but I really want to bring it to your attention that the marina needs serious attention, not just the boat part, but the landscaping part. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this item?
Madam Mayor, I have a comment from Dana Dilworth.
Okay.
Could the broken water fountain on the north side be fixed or improved to be fish cleaning station? Could the broken water fountain on the north side be fixed or improved to be fish cleaning station?
Okay. Are there any other members of the public online? Okay. Can I get a first and a second to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz?
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin?
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Thank you. So now we will consider adoption of resolution overruling protests and ordering the improvements and confirming the diagram and assessments for fiscal year 24-25. Any council discussion?
No. No.
Okay, can I get a first and a second to adopt a resolution overruling protests and ordering the improvements and confirming the diagram and assessments for fiscal year 24-25?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz?
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin?
Aye.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Aye. Thank you. We'll try to do this really quickly and get done by 11. City manager's report on upcoming activities.
I'll make this very easy towards our goal of trying to finish by 11. I have no report tonight other than to say I'm delighted to be here, my first meeting, and really appreciate the welcome that I've had from staff, the community, residents, and in particular the council. So thank you. I hope you read the blast that says most of what I would have said tonight anyway. So thank you.
Thank you. Countywide assignments and subcommittee reports. Who would like to report out?
I have nothing.
I have some. This is not this is just more mayor council matters, but I did want to note to the council that I received a phone call from Tyler Higgins. And he wanted to have an informal chat about timing of when his application was going to be submitted and when that might.
Could you, just for the public, they don't know who
Tyler Higgins is with Orchard Partners
Quarry
for
project.
the quarry.
for the quarry, and wanting to get like some informal feedback about like when the council might start considering their application, because he has an upcoming trip, and he wanted to know if I thought that it would be on like a September agenda, and I said I'm probably not going to be at meetings at the time, and it's most appropriate to confer with the mayor or to talk to city staff. And so I just pointed him in those directions, but it was mostly just, you know, that he had something coming up in his personal life and he didn't want to he didn't know if he should like rearrange his trip. But I was like, I have no input on any of those things. So I just kind of pointed him in the direction that he needed to go, and that was it. So
Thank you for reporting out on that. Colleen, do you have?
No, I will wait on anything I have to say till we have a little bit more time, not so late.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cliff? You don't have anything? No. Okay. So I do have a couple things. I had a meeting with San Francisco Roundtable, and one of the outcomes of that is that due to term limits, everybody that knows anything is terming out. And we had a technical working group meeting, which is, I am now the vice chair because the chair is terming out, and so then I'll be the chair. And we had a meeting with the Stanford Aeronautical Science people who gave us a fabulous report on 200,000 flights. They were all incoming flights, and whether the noise metrics from what the FAA uses to measure predictive noise was the same as realized noise. Turns out it's not. The noise is much more than what the FAA predicts, and they are getting ready to do a departure study. And the study they did for arrivals took 6 years.
Oh, boy.
But they're going to have, because they've got all the metrics in place, they feel they'll get the departure study done in about a year. And it was really helpful. It was a wonderful, awe-inspiring presentation. One of the outcomes of that, and I did talk to Councilmember Lentz about this, is that we are going to need a alternate on the roundtable because, and one of the reasons is Cliff really knows a lot of the roundtable stuff because he was on that subcommittee for a long time. And Councilmember Madison Davis is going to be having some other things going on when we need some backup as an alternate. And Cliff has agreed to be the alternate on that subcommittee. And so I just wanted to memorialize it here and get the approval of the council. That we would be rotating from having Councilmember Davis as the alternate to Cliff, and hopefully when I transition out from the role of council, he will be able to transition into the role on the roundtable. The other thing that I wanted to find out was on the Council of Cities this coming Friday, I'm not sure, not tomorrow, but a week, we need to vote on the MTC representation. I am not going to the dinner, but I will go to the business meeting unless someone else is going, and I understand no one else is. And there are two people that are vying for the MTC seat, and all cities are eligible. Foster City Vice Mayor Stacy Jimenez is seeking appointment, and Millbrae Mayor Anders Fung is seeking appointment. I would sort of like direction from you all to make a decision on who I will be voting for. Millbrae Mayor Anders Fung has reached out to Councilmember Mackin, and I have not heard from either of them, but I think Councilmember Mackin was impressed with what Anders Fung was saying about getting some local east-west transportation money and some other local shuttles and things of that nature that might be conducive to the wishes of Brisbane. But if anyone has a direction other than that, or has a connection with either of these two people, I'm happy to hear.
I sit with Anders Fung on the CCAG board. He's always prepared, very interested, and I've found him very easy to work with.
Okay. Anybody else has a comment?
And if I can just add, Anders reached out to me because he didn't know if we were all going to vote. I said, you should talk to the mayor, but I said, so what are you calling about? And he said that the transportation funding primarily goes to large cities and underserved communities, and he felt it should be more equally distributed because a lot of smaller communities had real transportation problems, east-west and connectivity. And I said, that's Brisbane. So he said that was going to be the main goal if he is seated on the TA. And I think that's a laudable goal
Yeah,
that would help us.
The east-west connectivity in
Right.
almost all of the cities on the peninsula is a nightmare for everybody. So Pacifica getting to here, Half Moon Bay getting across the hill, us going to Caltrain is east-west is a tough one.
So I think I've got my direction there unless somebody else has another comment. And that's where I will place my vote. The other thing is that we did get 2 letters sent by CCAG to the state asking for the governor to repeal SB 9. I think both of the letters were very spot on as far as some of the issues that are facing small cities and SB 9. And I would like to get confirmation from this council to go ahead and write a letter similar to direct staff to copy some of the information in those letters and go ahead and send them out on behalf of Brisbane and with my signature. But I would want to do that with the approval of this council.
Absolutely.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Yes. Cliff?
Are you okay with that?
You know, if that's the wishes of the council, I'm okay with it.
Okay. And that's all I've got to report on. Nobody else has anything? We will go ahead. Oh, you wanted to say something about the MTC or the SB 9 letters.
Oh, well, just for everybody's edification, I sit on the legislative committee for CCAG, and I also am on the CCAG board. And there was a unanimous vote against SB 9 at the legislative committee, and then the recommendation to the full CCAG board was also unanimously opposing SB 9. But just so everybody knows, there are 58 counties in California. We are one. And so we did not get our wishes. SB 9 went through for whatever reason, and nobody I know is happy at all.
Okay. With that, we are going to move on to oral communications number 2. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak?
Madam Mayor.
Please go ahead. We have 4 minutes.
Thanks,
Madam
Juan.
Mayor.
I think we should fight back on, oh, did you say yes?
I just wanted to confirm that we received written correspondence.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it there.
Carecas, Dilworth, Q, Limper, Gillespie, Lloyd, Dilworth, Laxamana, Florkowski, and Dilworth.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
2 things. One, I think that we should definitely fight back on SB 9 as a general law city and bring it down because SB 9 does not do anything to help the housing crisis for low-income families, et cetera. Number 2, since you brought up Tyler Higgins and Orchard Partners, why would they want to discuss their plan? Have we received the draft EIR yet? Well, isn't that pretty integral to get the draft EIR before we discuss their proposal?
That's what he was asking when we would be getting that.
Okay.
Said they're ready to submit, and then he's wondering when the council may see it. And I'm like, I don't know.
Okay. So we've been anxiously waiting to see the draft EIR.
There was no discussion of an application
No,
going
no,
on.
I understand that.
Okay.
I just want to know when the draft EIR is coming.
Okay, we shouldn't be having
Okay,
two-way.
thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to close in memory of Bob Wilson and Joy Mejia. And thank you all very much. We didn't have anyone else for oral communications, did we? No. So again, I will close in memory of Bob Wilson and Joy Mejia, and it is 11:58 p.m. 10:58. I'm sorry, 10:58. It looked like an 11 to me. And we're adjourned. Thank you.